Just come play with me. You're in reality. I said it's only a dream. It's only a dream. I wish you could somehow complete me. I would give it to you all now, but I kinda lost my key. I've been high, but I kinda lost the dream. I've been high, but I kinda lost the dream. Well, this medication strong and feel no. Guess you always have to try before you know. You say come here, love. Well, it'll be fine. Just talk to me. Ignoring reality. It's only a dream.
What you playing? I had an idea. Well, a song idea, but also an idea.
Let's hear it.
Yes, please.
I don't need you. I don't need you.
Room for 3 more?
I don't need you. But I want you to love me. I don't need you. But I want you to know me. Change your mind.
What if something bad happens?
Well, what if something good happens?
I need you. Need you. I need you.
Always,
I need you.
always,
Need you. I need you.
always. So why didn't you just come back?
I want to, but I just...
I need you. Need you. I need you.
Always,
I need you.
always,
I need you. I need you.
always.
Let's hear it.
I might have overreacted.
Need you. Need you. I need you. Need you. I but I want you to love me.
leaving. There's one more thing I had to mention.
What is it?
I love you. Bye.
See you later.
Mrs. McClellan, which poem would you like this evening? Since you express no preference, I shall select a poem at random. Sarah Teasdale, as I recall, your favorite. Oh, there will come soft rains and the smell of ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in their pool singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire, and not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. Mrs. McClellan. Mrs. McClellan. There will come soft rains and the smell of ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pool singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. Oh, there will come soft rains and the smell of ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and spring herself when she woke at dawn would scarcely know that we were gone. We were gone. It is done.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the soft rains have come, and it is time for Sci Fi Sunday. Yeah, I hope everybody's doing good. Welcome, Sammy. Hoorah, hoorah. Indeed, it is I. We're back up in space. It took me a little bit longer to get up here than per usual. And when I even got up here, I had to do a meal prep, so that took me a little while. I made some chickpeas, some broccoli florets, some sweet potatoes, some turkey, and some sauces to boot. I'm pretty excited. I've got a good number of dinners lined up for me this week. Yeah, dude, meal preps, I can't recommend them enough. They are incredibly helpful. Thanksgiving, interesting. You can have turkey on other times of the year. I'm a firm believer of that. Because in my opinion, turkey is delicious and far better than chicken. I know, might be a hot take, but hey, I said it. I also went and made myself a little smoothie, and some tea. So I'm fully ready and prepped for this little space adventure. How are you, silly? Did you have a good Sunday? You've been spooked? Why? Just realized. No wonder that was so hard to read. The brightness was down on this other monitor here, where I read chat. Been going into rabbit holes. Dude, those will get you. I know the feeling though, man. I can often get off task if I don't have like a clear list of stuff that I want to accomplish in a day. Even today, I didn't get everything done that I wanted to, but hey, it happens. I did get a lot done though, so well done, Mitch. A dungeon AI might be a good idea. Snap. I actually had that thought not a while back. I was considering doing it on Fantasy Friday, but we had the continuation of the Dungeons and Dragons night. But does AI Dungeon have other other like stuff to them? Right? Do they have adventures in the sci-fi genre? I think I saw that they have, because I watched Vinny Vinesauce play a little bit of it, and I think there's like a post-apocalyptic one, fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. Shoot, dude, it would work for all the nights. Nice, okay. Well, let's go ahead and read the stories that I've prepared tonight, and then we have a little extra time at the end. That sounds like a fun idea. It's just on a web browser, right? Right on, right on. Let's go ahead and plop over here. So I've prepared a number of stories. We have Arena by Frederick Brown. It's a bit of a longer one, but it's meant to be a classic. If you've ever seen Planet Hulk, this is the story that inspired that movie, and those series of comics. It is that classic, going to another planet, or winding up on another planet, and then being shoved into like a big Colosseum-esque battle for your life. And this is that original story, the first one to do that. Which is pretty sweet. I had no idea that it came from simply this story called Arena. I like the name too. It's real simple. Some good stuff. I also have this one, which is by Terry Bison. It's called They're Made Out of Meat. I think this was the one I was going to start with, since it's pretty short. It's about 3 pages long, so I think that would be a good one to kick off the night. And then, of course, I wanted to continue in The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. Yeah, dude, they're made out of meat does sound creepy as heck. Can open this with Google Docs. That actually might be better. Then we won't have all this hullabaloo. Nope. That didn't work. Shoot, I can go ahead and do this though. I think at least. Wow. Wow. There we go. I think that might be... No, that's not any better. Alright, cool. We'll just have to deal with the big stuff. I think I can actually make it smaller and then zoom in with this. Yeah. Now we're talking. Sorry, thank you for being patient, letting me figure that out. Some kind of urban legend. Oh yeah, I can see that. Let's see what They're Made Out of Meat is all about. So, this is They're Made Out of Meat by Terry Bison. Read by Mary Mitch. They're made out of meat. Meat? Meat. They're made out of meat. Meat. There's no doubt about it. We picked up several from different parts of the planet, took them aboard our recon vessels, and probed them all the way through. They're completely meat. That's impossible. What about the radio signals? The messages to the stars? They use the radio waves to talk, but the signals don't come from them. The signals come from machines. So, who made the machines? That's who we want to contact. They made the machines. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Meat made the machines. That's ridiculous. How can meat make a machine? You're asking me to believe in sentient meat. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. These creatures are the only sentient race in that sector, and they're made out of meat. Maybe they're like Orfole? Or Orfole? You know, a carbon-based intelligence that goes through a meat stage? Nope. They're born meat, and they die meat. We studied them for several of their lifespans, which didn't take long. Do you have any idea what the lifespan of meat is? Spare me. Okay, maybe they're only part meat. You know, like the Wedile. A meat head with an electron plasma brain inside. Nope. We thought of that. Since they do have meat heads, like the Wedile. But I told you, we probed them. They're meat all the way through. No brain? Oh, there's a brain all right. It's just that the brain is made out of meat. That's what I've been trying to tell you. So, what does the thinking? You're not understanding, are you? You're refusing to deal with what I'm telling you. The brain does the thinking. The meat. Thinking meat? You're asking me to believe in thinking meat? Yes, thinking meat. Conscious meat. Loving meat. Dreaming meat. The meat is the whole deal. Are you beginning to get the picture, or do I have to start all over? Oh my god. You're serious then? They're made out of meat. Thank you. Finally, yes. They are indeed made out of meat, and they've been trying to get in touch with us for almost 100 of their years. Oh my god. So what does this meat have in mind? First it wants to talk to us, then I imagine it wants to explore the universe, contact other sentiences, swap ideas and information, the usual. We're supposed to talk to meat. That's the idea. That's the message they're sending out by radio. Hello, anyone out there? Anybody home? That sort of thing. They actually do talk then. They use words, ideas, concepts. Oh yeah. Except they do it with meat. I thought you just told me they used radio. They do. But what do you think is on the radio? Meat sounds. You know how when you slap or flap meat, it makes noise. They talk by flapping their meat at each other. They can even sing by squirting air through their meat. Oh my god, singing meat. This is altogether too much. So what do you advise? Officially or unofficially? Both. Officially, we are required to contact, welcome, and log in any and all sentient races or multi-beings in this quadrant of the universe, without prejudice, fear, or favor. Unofficially, I advise that we erase the records and forget the whole thing. I was hoping you would say that. It seems harsh, but there is a limit. Do we really want to make contact with meat? I agree 100%. What's there to say? Hello, meat. How's it going? Will this work? How many planets are we dealing with here? Just one. They can travel to other planets in special meat containers, but they can't live on them. And being meat, they can only travel through sea space, which limits them to the speed of light and makes the possibility of their ever making contact pretty slim. Infinitesimal, in fact. So we just pretend there's no one home in the universe? That's it. Cruel. But you said it yourself. Who wants to meet? And the ones who have been aboard our vessels, the ones you probed? You're sure they won't remember? They'll be considered crackpots if they do. We went into their heads and smoothed out their meat so that we're just a dream to them. A dream to meat? How strangely appropriate. That we should be meat's dream. And we marked the entire sector unoccupied. Good. Agreed. Officially and unofficially. Case closed. Any others? Anyone interested on that side of the galaxy? Yes. A rather shy but sweet hydrogen core cluster intelligence in a Class 9 star in G445 zone. Was in contact 2 galactic rotations ago. Wants to be friendly again. They always come around. And why not? Imagine how unbearable, how unutterably cold the universe would be if one were all alone. The end. This story originally appeared in Omni-April 1991 and was nominated for the Nebula Award. It is taken from the collection Bears Discover Fire, available here. You can find out more about Terry Bison on his website. Shoot, dude. What was that? God, that picture is great, too. Oh yeah, was it meant to... Shoot. Yeah, that's... Wait, the meat is us, isn't it? For some reason, I was literally just thinking about blobs of meat. But, dang, no, they're talking about us, aren't they? Yeah, I think it could be like from the perspective of aliens looking at Earth, being like, these things are made out of meat. Like they're made out of meat. As we are mostly meat, and we have some water here or there and some bones, but we're primarily meat. We do flap our meat to at each other in order to speak. Yeah, we are mostly water. Hey, what's up, Loop Coops? Welcome! You just missed a pretty dang good story. It was a short one, but a sweet one. Called, They're Made Out of Meat. I believe it's from the perspective of, like, a conversation between two aliens, looking down at Earth. Having brought them in, probed them, and, you know, discovered that these creatures are made of meat. And it's just them kind of going through and considering how unbelievable that is to them. I think my favorite part of it was definitely... Where is it? Loving meat, dreaming meat. Meat is the whole deal. Yeah. What do you think is on the radio? Yeah, this part here. Meat sounds. You know, how when you slap or flap meat, it makes a noise. They talk by flapping their meat at each other. They can even sing by squirting air through their meat. Freaking wacky. Oh my god, singing meat. This is altogether too much. What do you advise? Yeah, we are more water than meat. What is it, 70%? I think. Well. That was solid. I should do a gaming stream one night. Yeah, I suppose I could. I was for a while there playing Ori and the Blind Forest before streams. Sammy does make a good point. One night a month. I have been recommended, it has been, asked of me that I play a horror game one Saturday. Instead of the usual spooky tales, we would play through a particularly spooky game. Yeah. I don't know, I think I considered making that a, some kind of stretch goal, you know? A donation goal. Oh goodness. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure which one I'd play yet, but I'm sure that one would do. Yeah, I'd have to look into it though. I want to play a good one. You know, one that isn't just horrifying, but also has a decent plot to it, and something that would actually drive me forward, you know? Because I don't want to get to a point in the game where I'm just like, alright, dude, screw this, I'm done. Mm. Uh, all the same refuses to what? All the samey refuse. All the same, I refuse to play it. LMAO. Yeah, dude, I get that. I am not a big horror game guy, which is why I don't think I'd play one on my own accord. But if I do hit some kind of goal in the stream, I would do it for you guys. Yeah, otherwise I'd enjoy playing Ori again on stream. That's one that I really want to continue, but haven't particularly found time for. Um, so I feel like playing it on stream would be a good opportunity. It's either that or I'd love to find one that just has a lot of dialogue and characters that I could act out. Something about feeling unsafe in my home is thrilling. Yeah, it's a love-hate thing for sure. It's certainly thrilling, but at what cost? After we read that Twitter thread from Greg last night, Greg and the eggs and the no-eyed lady, I will say coming out of that stream I was pretty spooked, especially going to the kitchen. We have a sliding glass door that goes out to a porch, and my brain just gave me the worst thought possible. As I turned the corner towards it, I was like, dude, what if just there's some freaky creature or just person like standing directly outside that glass door just staring at me? I don't know. It's those kind of thoughts that don't do anything good. But thankfully, like, I recognize, hey, that's an unhelpful thought. I'm gonna stop thinking about that now. And focus on putting my dish in the dishwasher. What gets me is when dreams become reality. Are you talking about just when you see something in your dream and then you see it again, like in real life? Because I find those situations kind of cool. Unless it's a spooky dream. But that hasn't happened to me yet. Most of the time it's just like weird glimpses of the future. Or it's just like a split second of like a frame of what I saw in a day or something. And then I come across it and I go, whoa, deja vu. But I don't know, I find those more just like weird and kind of cool rather than spooky. There are times when you might start to mix reality with dreams. And I feel like I haven't done that since since back when I used to smoke. That's the only time when that started to happen to me. I do get that. Looking back, it can be weird. Like memories get foggier and starts to become weird as to how accurate our memories are. Yeah, I've worked pretty hard to like hone my memory, get my memory back in working fashion. Sorry, I think somebody's using a hairdryer in the other room. I don't know if you can hear it, but my apologies if you can. Or I'm sorry if you can. Dreams scare you? Just in general? Is it because of the infinite possibilities of them? Your own imagination. Yeah, I do get that though. That's why it's important for me to basically train my thoughts and my imagination. Um, because if I allow it to like think, I don't know, if I allow it to continue to like imagine up horrible scenarios and horror stories and a bunch of negative stuff, it's just gonna do bad for me. That's why I try to practice imagining cool stuff. You're kind of the opposite. Well, let's see. Do we want to read The Illustrated Man or The Arena? If we do The Arena, I think that will be basically all I think the only other thing we read tonight, since it is quite long. I say we do Arena. I've been wanting to do a longer one, anyhow. So, and we've had a lot of Ray Bradbury in the past couple of Sci Fi Sundays. Right on. So, this is Arena by Frederick Brown. Read by Mary Mitch. Carson opened his eyes and found himself looking upwards into a flickering blue dimness. It was hot. He was lying on sand, and a rock embedded in the sand was hurting his back. He rolled over to his side off the rock and then pushed himself up to a sitting position. I'm crazy, he thought. Crazy. Or dead. Or something. The sand was blue, bright blue, and there wasn't any such thing as bright blue sand on Earth or any other planets. Blue sand under a blue dome that wasn't the sky, nor yet a room, but a circumscribed area. Somehow he knew it was circumscribed and finite, even though he couldn't see to the top of it. He picked up some of the sand in his hand and let it run through his fingers. It trickled down onto his bare leg. Bare. He was stark naked, and already his body was dripping perspiration from the enervating heat, coated blue with sand, wherever sand had touched it. Elsewhere, his body was white. He thought, then this sand is really blue. If it seemed blue only because of the blue light, then I'd be blue also. But I'm white, so the sand is blue. Blue sand. There isn't any blue sand. There isn't any place like this place I'm in. Sweat was running down in his eyes. It was hot, hotter than hell. Only hell. The hell of the ancients was supposed to be red and not blue. But if this place wasn't hell, what was it? Only Mercury among the planets had heat like this, and this wasn't Mercury. And Mercury was some 4 billion miles from... It came back to him then, where he'd been, in the little one-man scouter outside the orbit of Pluto, scouting a scant 1,000,000 miles to one side of the Earth armada, drawn up in battle array, there to intercept the outsiders. That sudden, strident ringing of the alarm bell when the rival scouter, the outsider ship, had come within range of his detectors. Hey, welcome Cramples, welcome May. We're just getting started with this one. It's called Arena, and our hero of the story, I assume, Carson, has awoken on a strange planet, covered in blue sand. And it's also apparently hot as the dickens. No one knew who the outsiders were, what they looked like, or from what far galaxy they came, other than that it was in the general direction of the Pleiades. First, there had been sporadic raids on Earth colonies and outposts, isolated battles between Earth patrols and small groups of outsider spaceships. Battles sometimes won and sometimes lost, but never resulting in the capture of an alien vessel. Nor had any member of the raided colony ever survived to describe the outsiders who had left the ships, if indeed they had left them. Not too serious a menace at first, for the raids had not been numerous or destructive, and individually the ships had proved slightly inferior in armament to the best of Earth's fighters, although somewhat superior in speed and maneuverability. A sufficient edge in speed, in fact, to give the outsiders their choice of running or fighting unless surrounded. Nevertheless, Earth had prepared for serious trouble, building the mightiest armada of all time. It had been waiting now, that armada, for a long time. Now the showdown was coming. Scouts, 20 billion miles out, had detected the approach of a mighty fleet of the outsiders. Those scouts had never come back, but their radiotronic messages had. And now, Earth's armada, all 10,000 ships and 500,000 fighting spacemen, was out there, outside Pluto's orbit, waiting to intercept and battle to the death. And an even battle it was going to be, judging by the advance reports of the men of the far picket line who had given their lives to report, before they had died, on the size and strength of the alien fleet. Anybody's battle, with the mastery of the solar system hanging in the balance on an even chance. The last and only chance, for Earth and all her colonies lay at the utter mercy of the outsiders if they ran that gauntlet. Oh yes. Bob Carson remembered now. He remembered that strident bell and his leap for the control panel, his frenzied fumbling as he strapped himself into his seat, the dot in the visiplate that grew larger, the dryness of his mouth, the awful knowledge that this was it for him, at least, although the main fleets were still out of range of one another. This, his first taste of battle. Within 3 seconds or less, he'd be victorious or a charred cinder. One hit completely took care of a lightly armed and armored one-man craft like a scouter. Frantically, as his lips shaped the word one, he worked at the controls to keep that growing dot centered on the crossed spiderwebs of the visiplate. His hands doing that while his right foot hovered over the pedal that would fire the bolt. The single bolt of concentrated hell that had to hit, or else there wouldn't be time for any second shot. 2. He didn't know he'd said that either. The dot in the visiplate wasn't a dot now. Only a few thousand miles away, it showed up in the magnification of the plate, as though it were only a few 100 yards off. It was a fast little scouter, about the size of his. An alien ship. All right. His foot touched the bolt release pedal. And then the outsider had swerved suddenly and was off the crosshairs. Carson punched keys frantically to follow. For a 1/10 of a second, it was out of the visiplate entirely. And then, as the nose of his scouter swung after it, he saw it again, diving straight towards the ground. The ground? It was an optical illusion of some sort. It had to be. The planet, or whatever it was, that now covered the visiplate couldn't be there. Couldn't possibly. There wasn't any planet nearer than Neptune 3 billion miles away, with Pluto on the opposite side of the distant pinpoint sun. His detectors, they hadn't shown any object of planetary dimensions, even of asteroid dimensions, and still didn't. It couldn't be there. That whatever it was he was diving into, only a few 100 miles below him. In his sudden anxiety to keep from crashing, he forgot the outsider ship. He fired the front-braking rockets, and even as the sudden change of speed slammed him forward against the seat straps, fired full right for an emergency turn. Pushed them down and held them down, knowing that he needed everything the ship had to keep from crashing, and that a turn that sudden would black him out for a moment. It did black him out. And that was all. Now, he was sitting in hot blue sand, stark naked, but otherwise unhurt. No sign of a spaceship and, for that matter, no sign of space. That curve overhead wasn't a sky, whatever else it was. He scrambled to his feet. Gravity seemed a little more than Earth normal. Not much more. Flat sand stretching away, a few scrawny bushes and clumps here and there. The bushes were blue, too, but in varying shades, some lighter than the blue of the sand, some darker. Out from under the nearest bush ran a little thing that was like a lizard, except that it had more than 4 legs. It was blue too, bright blue. It saw him and ran back under the bush. He looked up again, trying to decide what was overhead. It wasn't exactly a roof, but it was domed shaped. It flickered and was hard to look at, but definitely it curved down to the ground, to the blue sand all around him. He wasn't far from being under the center of the dome. At a guess, it was 100 yards to the nearest wall. If it was a wall. It was as though a blue hemisphere of something about 250 yards in circumference was inverted over the flat expanse of the sand. And everything blue, except one object. Over near a far curving wall, there was a red object, roughly spherical. It seemed to be about a yard in diameter. Too far for him to see clearly through the flickering blueness. But unaccountably, he shuddered. He wiped sweat from his forehead, or tried to, with the back of his hand. Was this a dream? A nightmare? This heat, this sand, that vague feeling of horror he felt when he looked toward that red thing. A dream? No. One didn't go to sleep and dream in the midst of a battle in space. Death? No, never. If there were immortality, it wouldn't be a senseless thing like this. A thing of blue heat and blue sand and a red horror. Then he heard a voice. Inside his head he heard it, not with his ears. It came from nowhere, or everywhere. Through spaces and dimensions wandering. Oh. Through spaces and dimensions wandering, rang the words in his mind. And in this space and this time, I find two peoples about to exterminate one, and so weaken the other that it would retrogress and never fulfill its destiny, but decay and return to mindless dust whence it came. And I say, this must not happen. Who? What are you? Carson didn't say it aloud, but the question formed itself in his brain. You would not understand completely. I am... There was a pause, as though the voice sought, in Carson's brain, for a word that wasn't there, a word he didn't know. I am the end of evolution, of a race so old the time cannot be expressed in words that have meaning to your mind. A race fused into a single entity, eternal. An entity such as your primitive race might become. Again, groping for a word. Time for now. So, might the race you call, in your mind, the outsiders? So I intervene in the battle to come, the battle between fleets so evenly matched that destruction for both races will result. One must survive. One must progress and evolve. One, thought Carson. Mine or... It is in my power to stop the war, to send the outsiders back to their galaxy. But they would return, or your race would sooner or later follow them there. Only by remaining in this space and time to intervene constantly could I prevent them from destroying one another. And I cannot remain. So I shall intervene now. I shall destroy one fleet completely without loss to the other. One civilization shall thus survive. Nightmare. This had to be a nightmare. Carson thought, but he knew it wasn't. It was too mad, too impossible to be anything but real. He didn't dare ask the question, which? But his thoughts asked it for him. The stronger shall survive, said the voice. That I cannot, and would not, change. I merely intervene to make it a complete victory, not groping again. Not Pyrrhic victory to a broken race. From the outskirts of the not-yet battle, I plucked 2 individuals, you and an outsider. I see from your mind that, in your early history of nationalisms, battles between champions to decide issues between races were not unknown. You and your opponent are here pitted against one another, naked and unarmed, under conditions equally unfamiliar to you both. Equally unpleasant to you both. There's no time limit, for here there is no time. You survive. The survivor is the champion of his race. That race survives. But, Carson's protest was too inarticulate for expression, but the voice answered it. It is fair. The conditions are such that the accident of physical strength will not completely decide the issue. There is a barrier. You will understand. Brain power and courage will be more important than strength. Most especially courage, which is the will to survive. But while this goes on, the fleets will... No. You're in another space, another time. For as long as you are here, time stands still in the universe you know. I see you wonder whether this place is real. It is. And it is not. As I, to your limited understanding, am and am not real. My existence is mental and not physical. You saw me as a planet. It could have been as a dust mote or a sun. But to you, this place is now real. What you suffer here will be real. And if you die here, your death will be real. If you die, your failure will be the end of your race. That is enough for you to know. And then the voice was gone. Again, he was alone, but not alone. For as Carson looked up, he saw that the red thing, the sphere of horror that he now knew was the outsider, was rolling towards him. Rolling. It seemed to have no legs or arms that he could see, no features. It rolled across the sand with the fluid quickness of a drop of mercury, and before it, in some manner he could not understand, came a wave of nauseating hatred. Carson looked about him frantically. A stone, lying in the sand a few feet away, was the nearest thing to a weapon. It wasn't large, but it had sharp edges, like a slab of flint. It looked a bit like blue flint. He picked it up and crouched to receive the attack. It was coming fast, faster than he could run. No time to think out how he was going to fight it. How anyway could he plan to battle a creature whose strength, whose characteristics, whose method of fighting he did not know? Rolling so fast, it looked more than ever like a perfect sphere. 10 yards away, 5, and then it stopped. Rather, it was stopped. Abruptly, the near side of it flattened as though it had run up against an invisible wall. It bounced. Actually bounced back. Then it rolled forward again, but more cautiously. It stopped again, at the same place. It tried again, a few yards to one side. Then it rolled forward again, but more cautiously. It stopped again, at the same place. It tried again, a few yards to one side. There was a barrier there, of some sort. It clicked then, in Carson's mind. That thought projected by the entity who had brought them here. Accident of physical strength will not completely decide the issue. There is a barrier. A force field, of course. Not the Netzian field known to Earth science, for that glowed and emitted a crackling sound. This one was invisible, silent. It was a wall that ran from side to side of the inverted hemisphere. Carson didn't have to verify that himself. The roller was doing that. Rolling sideways along the barrier, seeking a break in it that wasn't there. Carson took 6 steps forward, his left hand groping out before him, and touched the barrier. It felt smooth, yielding, like a sheet of rubber rather than like glass. Warm to his touch, but no warmer than the sand underfoot. And it was completely invisible, even at close range. He dropped the stone and put both hands against it, pushing. It seemed to yield just a trifle, but no farther than that trifle. Even when he pushed with all his weight, felt like a sheet of rubber backed up by steel. Limited resiliency, and then firm strength. He stood on tiptoe and reached as high as he could, and the barrier was still there. He saw the roller coming back, having reached one side of the arena. That feeling of nausea hit Carson again, and he stepped back from the barrier as it went by. It didn't stop. But did the barrier stop at ground level? Carson knelt down and burrowed in the sand. It was soft, light, easy to dig in, and 2 feet down the barrier was still there. The roller was coming back again. Obviously, it couldn't find a way through either side. There must be a way through, Carson thought, or else this duel is meaningless. The roller was back now, and it stopped just across the barrier, only 6 feet away. It seemed to be studying him, although, for the life of him, Carson couldn't find external evidence of sense organs on the thing. Nothing that looked like eyes or ears or even a mouth. There was, though, he observed, a series of grooves, perhaps 12 of them altogether, and he saw 2 tentacles push out from 2 of the grooves and dip into the sand as though testing its consistency. These were about 1 inch in diameter, and perhaps 1.5 feet long. The tentacles were retractable into the grooves, and were kept there except when in use. They retracted when the thing rolled, and seemed to have nothing to do with its method of locomotion. That, as far as Carson could judge, seemed to be accomplished by some shifting. Just how he couldn't imagine. of its center of gravity. He shuddered as he looked at the thing. It was alien, horribly different from anything on Earth or any of the life forms found on the other solar planets. Instinctively, he knew its mind was as alien as its body. If it could project that almost tangible wave of hatred, perhaps it could read his mind as well. Sufficiently for his purpose. Deliberately, Carson picked up the rock that had been his only weapon, and tossed it down again in a gesture of relinquishment, and raised up his empty hands, palms up, before him. He spoke aloud, knowing that although the words would be meaningless to the creature before him, speaking them would focus his own thoughts more completely upon the message. "Can we not have peace between us?" he said, his voice strange in the stillness. "The entity who brought us here has told us what must happen if our races fight. Extinction of one and weakening and retrogression of the other. The battle between them, said the entity, depends upon what we do here. Why cannot we agree to an eternal peace? Your race to its galaxy, we to ours." Carson blanked out his mind to receive a reply. It came, and it staggered him back physically. He recoiled several steps in sheer horror at the intensity of the lust to kill of the red images projected at him. For a moment, that seemed eternity, he had to struggle against the impact of that hatred, fighting to clear his mind of it and drive out the alien thoughts to which he had given admittance. He wanted to retch. His mind cleared, slowly. He was breathing hard, and he felt weaker, but he could think. He stood, studying the roller. It had been motionless. During the mental duel, it had so nearly won. Now it rolled a few feet to one side, to the nearest of the blue bushes. 3 tentacles whipped out of their grooves and began to investigate the bush. "Okay," Carson said. "So it's war then." He managed a grin. "If I got your answer straight, peace doesn't appeal to you." Because he was, after all, a young man, couldn't resist the impulse to be dramatic, he added, "To the death." But his voice, in the utter silence, sounded silly even to himself. It came to him then, that this was to the death. Not only his own death, or that of the red spherical thing, which he thought of as the roller, but death to the entire race of one or the other of them. The end of the human race if he failed. It made him suddenly very humble and very afraid to think that. With a knowledge that was above even faith, he knew that the entity who had arranged this duel had told him the truth about its intentions and its powers. The future of humanity depended on him. It was an awful thing to realize. He had to concentrate on the situation at hand. There had to be some way of getting through the barrier, or of killing through the barrier. Mentally, he hoped that wasn't all, for the roller obviously had stronger telepathic powers than the undeveloped ones of the human race. Or did it? He had been able to drive the thoughts of the roller out of his own mind. Could it drive out his? If its ability to project were stronger, Might not its receptivity mechanism be more vulnerable? He stared at it and endeavored to concentrate and focus all his thought upon it. Die, he thought. You are going to die. You are dying. You are... He tried variations of it and mental pictures. Sweat stood out on his forehead, and he found himself trembling with the intensity of the effort. But the roller went ahead with its investigation of the bush, as utterly unaffected as though Carson had been reciting the multiplication table. So that was no good. He felt dizzy from the heat and his strenuous effort at concentration. He sat down on the blue sand and gave his full attention to studying the roller. By study, perhaps he could judge its strength and detect its weaknesses. Learn things that would be valuable to know when and if they should come to grips. It was breaking off twigs. Carson watched carefully, trying to judge just how hard it worked to do that. Later, he thought he could find a similar bush on his own side, break off twigs of equal thickness himself, and gain a comparison of physical strength between his own arms and hands and those tentacles. The twigs broke off hard. The roller was having to struggle with each one. Each tentacle he saw bifurcated at the tip in 2 fingers, each tipped by a nail or claw. The claws didn't seem to be particularly long or dangerous, or no more so than his own fingernails, if they were left to grow a bit. No, on the whole, didn't look too hard to handle physically. Unless, of course, that bush was made of pretty strong stuff. Carson looked around. Within reach was another bush of identical, same type. He snapped off a twig. It was brittle, easy to break. Of course, the roller might have been faking deliberately, but he didn't think so. On the other hand, where was it vulnerable? How would he go about killing it if he got the chance? He went back to studying it. The outer hide looked pretty tough. He'd need a sharp weapon of some sort. He picked up the piece of rock again. It was about 12 inches long, narrow, fairly sharp on one end. If it chipped like flint, he could make a serviceable knife out of it. The roller was continuing its investigations of the bushes. It rolled again to the nearest one of another type. A little blue lizard, many-legged, like the one Carson had seen on his side of the barrier, darted out from under the bush. The tentacle of the roller lashed out and caught it, picked it up. Another tentacle whipped over and began to pull legs off of the lizard, as coldly as it had pulled twigs off of the bush. The creature struggled frantically and emitted a shrill squealing that was the first sound Carson had heard here, other than the sound of his own voice. Carson made himself continue to watch. Anything he could learn about his opponent might prove valuable. Even knowledge of its unnecessary cruelty. Particularly, he thought with sudden emotion, knowledge of its unnecessary cruelty. It would make it a pleasure to kill the thing, if and when the chance came. With half its legs gone, the lizard stopped squealing and lay limp in the roller's grasp. It didn't continue with the rest of the legs. Contemptuously, it tossed the dead lizard away from it, in Carson's direction. The lizard arced through the air between them and landed on his feet. It had come through the barrier. The barrier wasn't there anymore. Carson was on his feet in a flash, the knife gripped tightly in his hand, leaping forward. He'd settle this thing here and now. With the barrier gone. But it wasn't gone. He found that out the hard way, running head-on into it and nearly knocking himself silly. He bounced back and fell. As he sat up, shaking his head to clear it, he saw something coming through the air towards him, and threw himself flat again on the sand to one side. He got his body out of the way. There was a sudden, sharp pain in the calf of his left leg. He rolled backwards, ignoring the pain, and scrambled to his feet. It was a rock, he saw now, that had struck him, and the roller was picking up another, swinging it back, gripped between two tentacles, ready to throw again. It sailed through the air towards him, but he was able to step out of its way. The roller apparently could throw straight, but neither hard nor far. The first rock had struck him only because he had been sitting down and had not seen it coming until it was almost upon him. Even as he stepped aside from that weak second throw, Carson drew back his right arm and let fly with the rock that was still in his hand. If missiles, he thought with elation, can cross the barrier, then two can play at the game of throwing them. He couldn't miss a 3-foot sphere at only 4-yard range, and he didn't miss. The rock whizzed straight, and with a speed several times that of the missiles the roller had thrown. It hit dead center, but hit flat instead of point first. But it hit with a resounding thump, and obviously hurt. The roller had been reaching for another rock, changed its mind and got out of there instead. By the time Carson could pick up and throw another rock, the roller was 40 yards back from the barrier and going strong. His second throw missed by feet, and his third throw was short. The roller was out of range of any missile heavy enough to be damaging. Carson grinned. The round had been his. He stopped grinning as he bent over to examine the calf of his leg. A jagged edge of the stone had made a cut several inches long. It was bleeding pretty freely, but he didn't think it had gone deep enough to hit an artery. If it stopped bleeding of its own accord, well and good. If not, he was in for trouble. Finding out one thing, though, took precedence over that cut. The nature of the barrier. He went forward to it again, this time groping his hands before him. Holding one hand against it, he tossed a handful of sand at it with the other hand. The sand went right through. His hand didn't. Organic matter versus inorganic? No, because the dead lizard had gone through it. And a lizard, alive or dead, was certainly organic. Plant life. He broke off a twig and poked it at the barrier. The twig went through, with no resistance, but when his fingertips gripping the twig came to the barrier, they were stopped. He couldn't get through it, nor could the roller. But rocks, and sand, and a dead lizard. How about a live lizard? He went hunting under bushes until he found one and caught it, tossed it against the barrier, and it bounced back and scurried away across the blue sand. That gave him the answer. So far as he could determine now, the screen was a barrier to living things. Dead or inorganic matter could cross it. With that off his mind, Carson looked at his injured leg. The bleeding was lessening, which meant he wouldn't need to worry about it. Making a tourniquet. But he should find some water, if any was available, to clean the wound. water. The thought of it made him realize that he was getting awfully thirsty. He'd have to find water, in case this contest turned out to be a protracted one. Limping slightly now, he started off to make a circuit of his half of the arena. Guiding himself with one hand along the barrier, he walked to his right until he came to the curving side wall. It was visible. A dull blue-gray at close range, and the surface of it felt just like the central barrier. He experimented by tossing a handful of sand at it, and the sand reached the wall and disappeared as it went through. The hemispherical shell was a force field too, but an opaque one instead of a transparent, like the barrier. He followed it round until he came back to the barrier, and walked back along the barrier to the point from which he'd started. No sign of water. Worried now, he started a series of zigzags back and forth between the barrier and the wall, covering the intervening space thoroughly. No water, blue sand, blue bushes, and intolerable heat. Nothing else. It must be his imagination, he told himself, that he was suffering that much from thirst. How long had it been? Of course, no time at all, according to his own space-time frame. Space-time frame. The entity had told him time stood still out here, while he was here. But his body processes went on here just the same. According to his body's reckoning, how long had he been here? 3 or 4 hours, perhaps. Certainly not long enough to be suffering from thirst. Yet he was suffering from it. His throat was dry and parched. Probably the intense heat was the cause. It was hot. 130 Fahrenheit at a guess. A dry, still heat without the slightest movement of air. He was limping rather badly and utterly fatigued when he finished the futile exploration of his domain. He stared across at the motionless roller and hoped it was as miserable as he was. The entity had said the conditions were equally unfamiliar and uncomfortable for both of them. Maybe the roller came from a planet where 200-degree heat was the norm. Maybe it was freezing while he was roasting. Maybe the air was as much too thick for it as it was too thin for him. For the exertion of his explorations had left him panting. The atmosphere here, he realized, was not much thicker than on Mars. No water. That meant a deadline. For him, at any rate, unless he could find a way to cross the barrier, or to kill his enemy from this side of it. Thirst would kill him eventually. It gave him a feeling of desperate urgency, but he made himself sit down a moment to rest, to think. What was there to do? Nothing, and yet so many things. The several varieties of bushes, for example. They didn't look promising, but he'd have to examine them for possibilities. And his leg, he'd have to do something about that, even without water to clean it. Gather ammunition in the form of rocks, find a rock that would make a good knife. His leg hurt rather badly now, and he decided that came first. One type of bush had leaves, or things rather similar to leaves. He pulled off a handful of them and decided after examination to take a chance on them. He used them to clean off the sand and dirt that caked blood, then made a pad of fresh leaves and tied it over the wound with tendrils from the same bush. The tendrils proved unexpectedly tough and strong. They were slender and pliable, yet he couldn't break them at all, and had to saw them off the bush with the sharp edge of blue flint. Some of the thicker ones were over a foot long, and he filed away in his memory, for future reference, the fact that a bunch of the thick ones tied together would make a pretty serviceable rope. Maybe he'd be able to think of a use for rope. Next, he made himself a knife. The blue flint did chip. From a foot-long splinter of it, he fashioned himself a crude but lethal weapon. And of tendrils from the bush, made himself a rope belt through which he could thrust the flint knife, to keep it with him all the time, and yet have his hands free. He went back to study the bushes. There were 3 other types. One was leafless, dry, brittle, rather like a dried tumbleweed. Another was of soft, crumbly wood, almost like punk. It looked and felt as though it would make excellent tinder for a fire. The third type was the most nearly wood-like. It had fragile leaves that wilted at the touch, but the stalks, although short, were straight and strong. It was horribly, unbearably hot. He limped up to the barrier, felt to make sure that it was still there. It was. He stood watching the roller for a while. It was keeping a safe distance from the barrier, out of effective stone-throwing range. It was moving around back there, doing something. He couldn't tell what it was doing. Once it stopped moving, came a little closer, seemed to concentrate its attention on him. Again, Carson had to fight off a wave of nausea. He threw a stone at it. The roller retreated and went back to whatever it had been doing before. At least he could make it keep its distance. And he thought bitterly a lot of good that did him. Just the same, he spent the next hour or 2 gathering stones of suitable size for throwing, and making several piles of them near his side of the barrier. His throat burned now. It was difficult for him to think about anything except water. But he had to think about other things, about getting through the barrier, under or over it, getting at the red sphere and killing it before this place of heat and thirst killed him. The barrier went to the wall upon either side. How high? How far under the sand? For a moment, Carson's mind was too fuzzy to think out how he could find out either of those things. Idly, sitting there in the hot sand, he didn't remember sitting down. He watched a blue lizard crawl from the shelter of one bush to the shelter of another. From under the second bush, it looked out at him. Carson grinned at it, recalling the old story of the desert colonists on Mars, taken from an older story of Earth. Pretty soon, you get so lonesome you find yourself talking to the lizards. And then not so long after, you find the lizards talking back to you. He should have been concentrating, of course, on how to kill the roller, but instead he grinned at the lizard and said, "Hello there." The lizard took a few steps towards him. "Hello," it said. Carson was stunned for a moment. Then he put back his head and roared with laughter. It didn't hurt his throat to do so either. He hadn't been that thirsty. Why not? Why should the entity who thought up this nightmare of a place not have a sense of humor, along with the powers he had? Talking lizards, equipped to talk back in his own language. If I talk to them, it's a nice touch. He grinned at the lizard and said, "Come on over." But the lizard turned and ran away, scurrying from bush to bush until it was out of sight. He had to get past the barrier. He couldn't get through it or over it, but was he certain he couldn't get under it? And come to think of it, didn't one sometimes find water by digging? Painfully now, Carson limped up to the barrier and started digging, scooping up sand, a double handful at a time. It was slow work, because the sand ran in at the edges and deeper, and the deeper he got, the bigger in diameter the hole had to be. How many hours it took him, he didn't know, but he hit bedrock 4 feet down, dry bedrock, with no sign of water. The force field of the barrier went down clear to the bedrock. He crawled out of the hole and lay there panting, then raised his head to look across and see what the roller was doing. It was making something out of wood from the bushes, tied together with tendrils and queerly shaped framework, about 4 feet high and roughly square. To see it better, Carson climbed onto the mound of sand he had excavated and stood there staring. There were 2 long levers sticking out of the back of it, one with a cup-shaped affair on the end. Seemed to be some sort of catapult, Carson thought. Sure enough, the roller was lifting a sizable rock into the cup shape. One of his tentacles moved the other lever up and down for a while. Then he turned the machine, slightly aiming it, and the lever with the stone flew up and forward. The stone curved several yards over Carson's head, so far away that he didn't have to duck. But he judged the distance it had traveled and whistled softly. He couldn't throw a rock that weight more than half that distance, and even retreating to the rear of his domain wouldn't put him out of range of that machine if the roller pushed it forward to the barrier. Another rock whizzed over, not quite so far away this time. Moving from side to side along the barrier so the catapult wouldn't bracket him, he hurled a dozen rocks at it. But that wasn't going to be any good, he saw. They had to be light rocks, or he couldn't throw them that far. If they hit the framework, they bounced off harmlessly. The roller had no difficulty at that distance in moving aside from those that came near it. Besides, his arm was tiring badly. He ached all over. He stumbled to the rear of the arena. Even that wasn't any good. The rocks reached back there, too. Only there were longer intervals between them, as though it took longer to wind up the mechanism whatever it was, of the catapult. Warily, he dragged himself back to the barrier again. Several times he fell and could barely rise to his feet to go on. He knew, near the limit of his endurance. Yet he didn't dare stop moving now, until and unless he could put that catapult out of action. If he fell asleep, he'd never wake up. One of the stones from it gave him the glimmer of an idea. It hit one of those piles of stones he'd gathered near the barrier to use as ammunition, and struck sparks. Sparks! Fire! Primitive man had made fire by striking sparks, and with some of those dry, crumbly bushes as tinder. A bush of that type grew near him. He uprooted it, took it over to the pile of stones, then patiently hit one stone against another until a spark touched punk-like wood of the bush. It went up in flames so fast that it singed his eyebrows and was burned to an ash within seconds. But he had the idea now, and within minutes had a little fire going in the lee of the mounds of sand he'd made. The tinder bushes started it, and other bushes which burned more slowly kept it a steady flame. The tough tendrils didn't burn readily. That made the fire bombs easy to rig and throw. A bundle of frags tied about a small stone to give it weight, and a loop of the tendril to swing it by. He made half a dozen of them before he lit and threw the first. It went wide, and the roller started a quick retreat, pulling the catapult after him. But Carson had the others ready and threw them in rapid succession. The fourth wedged in the catapult's framework and did the trick. The roller tried desperately to put out the spreading blaze by throwing sand, but its clawed tentacles would take only a spoonful at a time, and its efforts were ineffectual. The catapult burned. The roller moved safely away from the fire and seemed to concentrate its attention on Carson. Again he felt a wave of hatred and nausea, but more weakly. Either the roller itself was weakening, or Carson had learned how to protect himself against the mental attack. Let's see, we're on page 13 at the moment. I really need to hit the restroom. And we're at the hour and 40 marker, so let's go ahead and take a break. You guys cool with that? Because I'm cool with that. It is being a good story, isn't it? Time for a break. Oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump to the break. You'll know I'm heading back in and am about to appear once I play the intro theme again. So listen for that, and you'll know to sit yourself down and get ready for the end of Arena to see who triumphs, the roller or the human Carson. Rolling around. Alright, enough of that. So guys, as always, I encourage everybody to stand up during the break. Go ahead and stretch out. Hit the restroom. Smash that restroom with your powers of making water. And heck yeah, go ahead and get yourself some water or any other snack or drink you might like. And try to stretch out a little. Cool. Again, listen for the intro theme to know that I'll be heading back. It's about 35 past the hour now, so I'll be back no later than 45 past the hour. Cool beans. Much love, guys, and I'll be seeing you very soon. Till then, keep on swaying, my wildflowers. Burp.
Oh, yes, that's perfect.
What else is there? What else are we gonna be?
Mrs. McClellan, which poem would you like this evening? Since you express no preference, I shall select a poem at random. So Teasdale, as I recall, your favorite. Oh, there will come soft rains and the smell of ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in their pool singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire. And not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. Mrs. McClellan, Mrs. McClellan. There will come soft rains and the smell of ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pool singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. Oh, there will come soft rains and the smell of ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and spring herself when she woke at dawn would scarcely know that we were gone. We were gone. It is done.
Well, now that the soft rains have come yet again, it's time to get back to our little story. How's everybody doing? How's the break?
Mrs. McClellan, which poem would you like?
No, enough soft rains. I'm sorry. Only need to hear it once. Thank you. I guess the system thought I wanted an encore or something. You know that situation where you go like, "Hey Alexa, play this song," and then it plays it, but then like after it's done, you're like, "Oh, that was a nice one." It just replays it again. What the heck? What's up with that? Got an apple and water. I'm jealous I'm gelling like a felon, dude. I wish I had an apple. I did buy apples today though, which I'm excited about. They're apparently organic Honeycrisp apples, which I don't know how much more healthy those are, but it makes me feel better about getting the Honeycrisp ones, which are sweet and delicious, and I love them. Nice, you're chilling, mobbing? Heck yeah, dude. I caught your Celeste stream for a little bit there. It was right during the part where you like turned off the mic and we're about to go into the gamer zone. It was a pretty sweet moment. Otherwise, how'd the rest of the stream go, dude? You know what else I picked up? This Sleepy Time Tea Extra. It's called Extra. Like, Sleepy Time Tea Extra. That's like calling it like Sleepy Time Tea Extreme. Which, I mean, I can get down with. It's got extra sleepy aid. Which is nice. And it has that like natural sleep aid thing. I forget what it's called. Serotonin? Is that it? Tried 6 hours trying to get the time. I didn't get it. No, it's not melatonin. It's the other thing. The other one. Starts with an S. Definitely not serotonin. Yeah, no, that's probably right. I'd have to go get the box to know. Serotonin's something different, right? And very different. I don't even know what it is. Do I? I feel like I do. Oh no. It's like a chemical that your brain makes, right? Something. Yeah, that's the one. Definitely not serotonin. That's dopamine? Oh. That. Don't matter none. I'm sorry you didn't get the time though, dude. Are you doing time trials or something? I only did like the main game and then did some strawberry hunting, but I don't know, is there an extra part to the game where you get more rewards or something if you speedrun it? Chapter 1 Dashless. Oh, I was wondering what you were doing, dude. I was like, for a hot second there, or for a couple moments there, I was like, he's not dashing for a reason, isn't he? Thank you for confirming my suspicions. No. Dude, that's so close. You're getting there, dude. 1.5 hours. Oof. Shoot, dude. Well, hey, now that you've been working hard and not dashing and whatnot, it's time to relax and listen to a story about two entities from across the galaxy attempting to kill each other for the sake of their own race's survival. Real relaxing stuff, you know? Oh, yeah. Yeah, to give you guys an update for those of you that just joined. Oh, say goodbye, Skippy. We're reading right up there, a story called Arena by, let me see, on page 13. Arena by Frederick Brown. If you've seen Planet Hulk or read through those comics, then you most likely have a good idea as to what this is about. It's the first ever thing. Oh no. Oh boy. First ever. Big book. Thank you, May, for spending the 1,000 points for book on. Frick! See, the trouble is I can't see anything with the book on my face. Sorry, guys. I hope that wasn't like obscenely loud. Goodness. Well, thank you guys for redeeming the book on face channel point reward. I hope I did it justice. Not sure how it looked on the camera, but I did do the book on face. Wait, there's another? What? Nothing like the smell of good literature, am I right? Best stream. Heck yeah, dude. So now you guys have an option to, if you ever feel like making me put a book on my face, you absolutely can. It's honestly kind of nice too. Not even gonna front. Do you ever have those moments where you just close your eyes and take a deep breath and the world goes away for a minute? You forget about all your troubles. That's kind of like, it's what that does for me, you know? So, thank you. I got crud in my eye. Crud in my eye. Okay, without further ado, let's get back into this. I want to see how this concludes. I have a feeling, I don't know, I'm gonna make a guess right now that neither of them win. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, people do that for a reason, you know? They put the hat down over their eyes or put a book on their face. It's a good substitute for one of those, like, eye masks. Just make sure it's like a comfy book. And make sure it's a book worthy of being on your face. You know what I'm saying? Don't just want no Amelia Bedelia, okay? Gotta get something good, like Captain Underpants. Alright? Alrighty, let's go ahead and jump on in. He thumbed his nose at it, and then sent it scuttling back to safety with a stone. The roller went to the back half of its arena. To the back of its half of the arena, and started pulling up bushes again. Probably it was going to make another catapult. Carson verified that the barrier was still operating, and then found himself sitting in the sand beside it, suddenly too weak to stand up. His leg throbbed steadily now, and the pangs of thirst were severe. But those things paled beside the physical exhaustion that gripped his entire body. Hell must be like this, he thought. The hell that the ancients had believed in. He fought to stay awake, and yet staying awake seemed futile. There was nothing he could do while the barrier remained impregnable, and the roller stayed back out of range. He tried to remember what he had read in books of archaeology about the methods of fighting used back in the days before metal and plastic. The stone missile had come first, he thought. Well, that he already had. Bow and arrow? No, he tried archery once, and knew his own ineptness even with a modern sportsman's Durasteel weapon. Made for accuracy. With only the crude, pieced-together outfit he could make here, he doubted if he could shoot as far as he could throw a rock. Spear? Well, he could make that. It would be useless at any distance, but would be handy at close range. If he ever got to close range. Making one would help keep his mind from wandering, as it was beginning to do. He was still beside one of those piles of stones. He sorted through until he found one shaped roughly like a spearhead. With a smaller stone, he began to chip it into shape, fashioning sharp shoulders on the sides so that if it penetrated, it would not pull out again like a harpoon. A harpoon was better than a spear, maybe, for this crazy contest. If he could once get it into the roller, and had a rope on it, he could pull the roller up against the barrier and the stone blade of his knife would reach through that barrier, even if his hands wouldn't. The shaft was harder to make than the head, but by splitting and joining the main stems of 4 of the bushes, and wrapping the joints with the tough but thin tendrils, he got a strong shaft about 4 feet long, and tied the stone head in a notch cut in one end. It was crude, but strong. With the tendrils, he made himself 20 feet of line. It was light and didn't look strong, but he knew it would hold his weight, and to spare. He tied one end of it to the shaft of the harpoon, and the other end about his wrist. At least, if he threw his harpoon across the barrier, he'd be able to pull it back if he missed. He tried to stand up, to see what the roller was doing. He found he couldn't get to his feet. On the 3rd try, he got as far as his knees, and then fell flat again. I've got to sleep, he thought. If a showdown came now, I'd be helpless. He could come up here and kill me if he knew. I've got to regain some strength. Slowly, painfully, he crawled back from the barrier. The jar of something thudding against the sand near him wakened him from a confused and horrible dream to a more confused and horrible reality. And he opened his eyes again to blue radiance over blue sand. How long had he slept? A minute? A day? Another stone thudded near and threw sand on him. He got his arms under him and sat up. He turned around and saw the roller 20 yards away at the barrier. It rolled off hastily as he sat up, not stopping until it was as far away as it could get. He'd fallen asleep too soon, he realized, while he was still in range of the roller's throwing. Seeing him lying motionless, it had dared to come to the barrier. Luckily, it didn't realize how weak he was, or it could have stayed there, kept on throwing stones. He started crawling again, this time forcing himself to keep going until he was as far as he could go, until the opaque wall of the arena's outer shell was only a yard away. Then, things slipped away again. When he awoke, nothing about him was changed, but this time, he knew that he had slept a long while. The first thing he became aware of was the inside of his mouth. It was dry, caked. His tongue was swollen. Something was wrong. He knew as he returned slowly to full awareness. He felt less tired, and the stage of utter exhaustion had passed. But there was pain. Agonizing pain. It wasn't until he tried to move that he knew it came from his leg. He raised his head and looked down at it. It was swollen below the knee, and the swelling showed even halfway up his thigh. The plant tendrils he had tied round the protective pad of leaves now cut deeply into his flesh. To get his knife under that embedded lashing would have been impossible. Fortunately, the final knot was over the shin bone, where the vine cut in less deeply than elsewhere. He was able, after an effort, to untie the knot. He looked under the pad of leaves, and it showed him the worst. Infection and blood poisoning. Without drugs, without even water, there wasn't a thing he could do about it, except die when the poison spread through his system. He knew it was hopeless. Then, and that he'd lost, and with him, humanity. When he died here, out there in the universe, he knew all his friends, everybody, would die too. Earth and the colonized planets would become the home of the red-rolling alien outsiders. It was that thought which gave him courage to start crawling, almost blindly toward the barrier again, pulling himself along by his arms and hands. There was a chance in a million that he'd have strength left when he got there to throw his harpoon spear just once, and with deadly effect. If the roller would come up to the barrier, or if the barrier was gone. Took him years, it seemed, to get there. The barrier wasn't gone. Was as impassable as when he'd first felt it. The roller wasn't at the barrier. He raised himself up on his elbows. He could see it at the back of its part of the arena, working on a wooden framework that was a half-completed duplicate of the catapult he'd destroyed. It was moving slowly now. Undoubtedly, it had weakened too. Carson doubted that it would ever need a second catapult. He'd be dead, he thought, before it was finished. His mind must have slipped for a moment, where he found himself beating his fists against the barrier in futile rage, and made himself stop. He closed his eyes, tried to make himself calm. "Hello?" said a voice. It was a small, thin voice. He opened his eyes and turned his head. It was a lizard. "Go away," Carson wanted to say. "Go away. You're not really here. Or you're there, but you're not really talking. I'm imagining things again." But he couldn't talk. His throat and tongue were past all speech with the dryness. He closed his eyes again. "Hurt," said the voice. "Kill! Hurt! Kill! Come!" He opened his eyes again. The blue 10-legged lizard was still there. It ran a little way along the barrier. Came back, started off again, came back. "Hurt," it said. "Kill! Come!" Again, it started off and came back. Obviously, it wanted Carson to follow it along the barrier. He closed his eyes again. The voice kept on. The same 3 meaningless words. Each time he opened his eyes, it ran off and came back. "Hurt! Kill! Come!" Carson groaned. Since there would be no peace unless he followed the thing, he crawled after it. Another sound. A high-pitched squealing came to his ears. There was something lying in the sand, writhing, squealing. Something small, blue, that looked like a lizard. He saw it was the lizard whose legs the roller had pulled off so long ago. It wasn't dead. It had come back to life and was wriggling and screaming in agony. "Hurt!" said the other lizard. "Hurt! Kill! Kill!" Carson understood. He took the flint knife from his belt and killed the tortured creature. The live lizard scurried off. Carson turned back to the barrier. He leaned his hands and head against it and watched the roller far back, working on the new catapult. I couldn't get far, he thought. If I could get through. If I could get through, I might win yet. It looks weak, too. I might. And then there was another reaction of hopelessness. When pain sapped his will, he wished that he were dead, envying the lizard he'd just killed. It didn't have to live on and suffer. He was pushing on the barrier, the flat of his hands, when he noticed his arms, how thin and scrawny they were. He must really have been here a long time, for days, to get as thin as that. For a while, he was almost hysterical again. And then came a time of deep calm and thought. The lizard he had just killed had crossed the barrier still alive. It had come from the roller's side. The roller had pulled off its legs and then tossed it contemptuously at him, and it had come through the barrier. It hadn't been dead, merely unconscious. A live lizard couldn't go through the barrier, but an unconscious one could. The barrier was not a barrier then to living flesh, but a conscious flesh. It was a mental protection, a mental hazard. With that thought, Carson started to crawl along the barrier, to make his last, desperate gamble, a hope so forlorn that only a dying man would have dared try it. He moved along the barrier to the mound of sand about 4 feet high. which he'd scooped out while trying, how many days ago, to dig under the barrier or to reach water. The mound lay right at the barrier. Its farther slope, half on one side of the barrier, half on the other. Taking with him a rock from the pile nearby, he climbed up to the top of the dune and lay there against the barrier, so that if the barrier were taken away, he'd roll down the short slope into enemy territory. He checked to be sure that the knife was safely in his rope belt, that the harpoon was in the crook of his left arm, and that the 20-foot rope fastened to it and to his wrist. Then, with his right hand, he raised the rock with which he would hit himself on the head. Luck would have to be with him on that blow. It would have to be hard enough to knock him out, but not hard enough to knock him out for long. He had a hunch that the roller was watching him, and would see him roll down through the barrier and come to investigate. He would believe he was dead, he hoped. He thought it had probably drawn the same deduction about the nature of the barrier that he had, but it would come cautiously. He would have a little time. He struck himself. Pain brought him back to consciousness. A sudden, sharp pain in his hip that was different from the pain in his head and leg. He had, thinking things out before he had struck himself, anticipated that very pain, even hoped for it, and had steeled himself against awakening with a sudden movement. He opened his eyes, just a slit, and saw that he had guessed rightly. The roller was coming closer. It was 20 feet away. The pain had awakened him. The pain that had awakened him was the stone it had tossed to see whether he was alive or dead. He lay still. It came closer, 15 feet away, and stopped again. Carson scarcely breathed. As nearly as possible, he was keeping his mind a blank, lest its telepathic ability detect consciousness in him. And with his mind blanked out that way, the impact of its thoughts upon his mind was shattering. He felt sheer horror as the alienness, the differentness of those thoughts, conveying things that he felt but could not understand or express, because no terrestrial language had words. No terrestrial brain had images to fit them. The mind of a spider, he thought, or the mind of a praying mantis, nor a Martian sand serpent, raised to intelligence and put in telepathic rapport with human minds, would be a homely, familiar thing compared to this. He understood now that the entity had been right. Man or roller, the universe was not a place that could hold both of them. Closer. Carson waited until it was only feet away, until its clawed tentacles reached out. Oblivious to agony now, he sat up, raised and flung the harpoon with all his strength that remained to him. As the roller, deeply stabbed by the harpoon, rolled away, Carson tried to get to his feet to run after it. He couldn't do that. He fell, but kept crawling. It reached the end of the rope, and he was jerked forward by the pull on his wrist. It dragged him a few feet and then stopped. Carson kept going, pulling himself towards it, hand over hand along the rope. it stopped there, tentacles trying in vain to pull out the harpoon. It seemed to shudder and quiver, and then realized that it couldn't get away, for it rolled back towards him, clawed tentacles reaching out. Stone knife in hand, he met it. He stabbed again and again, while those horrid claws ripped skin and flesh and muscle from his body. He stabbed and slashed, and at last, it was still. A bell was ringing, and it took him a while after he'd opened his eyes to tell where he was and what it was. He was strapped into the seat of his scouter, and the visiplate before him showed only empty space. No outsider ship, and no impossible planet. The bell was the communications plate signal. Someone wanted him to switch power into the receiver. Purely reflex action enabled him to reach forward and throw the lever. The face of Brander, captain of the Magellan, mothership of his group of scouters, flashed into the screen. His face was pale, and his black eyes glowing with excitement. "Magellan to Carson," he snapped. "Come on in. The fight's over. We've won." The screen went blank. Brander would be signaling the other scouters to his command. Slowly, Carson set the controls for the return. Slowly, unbelievingly, he unstrapped himself from the seat and went back to get a drink at the cold water tank. For some reason, he was unbelievably thirsty. He drank 6 glasses. He leaned there against the wall, trying to think. Had it happened? He was in good health, sound, uninjured. His thirst had been mental rather than physical. His throat hadn't been dry. He pulled up his trouser leg and looked at the calf. There was a long white scar there, but a perfectly healed scar. Hadn't been there before. He zipped open the front of his shirt and saw that his chest and abdomen were crisscrossed with tiny, almost unnoticeable, perfectly healed scars. It had happened. The scouter under automatic control was already entering the hatch of the mothership. The grapples pulled it into its individual lock, and a moment later, a buzzer indicated that the lock was air-filled. Carson opened the hatch and stepped outside, went through the double door of the lock. He went right to Brander's office, went in, and saluted. Brander still looked dazed. "Hi, Carson," he said. "What you missed. What a show." "What happened, sir?" "Don't know exactly. We fired one salvo and their whole fleet went up in dust. Whatever it was jumped from ship to ship in a flash. Even the ones we hadn't aimed at and that were out of range. The whole fleet disintegrated before our eyes. We didn't get the paint of a single ship scratched." "We can't even claim credit for it." "Oh, we can't even claim credit for it. Must have been some unstable component in the metal they used, and our sighting shot just set it off. Man, too bad you missed all the excitement." Carson managed a sickly ghost of a grin, for it would be days before he'd be over the impact of his experience. but the captain wasn't watching. "Yes, sir," he said. Common sense, more than modesty, told him he'd be branded as the worst liar in space if he ever said any more than that. "Yes, sir." Too bad I missed all the excitement. Well, snap. That was pretty dang good. The arena. God. Dude. The whole fact that he can't tell anybody about it. I mean, hurrah, yay humans. They didn't die, but I don't know. Goodness. I wonder why Carson. Was it just because he was scouting? Was he picked randomly? Also, that mentally based entity? What the heck? Yeah, it must have been traumatic. Hard to even imagine. To be plucked out of space and time. Dropped into an arena that is just as that, out of space and time. That last idea was clever, though. And he executed it real well. And he actually had the chutzpah to knock himself out. I guess like it said it perfectly. You know, only a desperate man at death's door would try what he did. Phew. Whew. And alive. The man's alive. Yeah. I also love how it starts off with simply giving the scenario that he's in the moment, and then going back for a moment through, you know, what he remembered. The pacing and the transitions I felt were real good. Yeah, from giving an idea of where he is and how he feels about it, to him remembering what happened before he wound up there, to the alien voice then coming in to describe what his scenario truly is, and then on to the main event, the battle. Gosh, that entity was almost godlike, right? It evolved to a point of being able to just screw with, like, lower entities. Or not necessarily screw with, but, like, I don't know. Do things that would change the course of history. Because in a way, like, the being did that to protect the universe, right? Like, it was like, yo, I see potential in you. You could be like me one day. A flippin', basically a god. But both of your races are like that. So go ahead and fight it out so that both of your, stinky, unevolved races don't go extinct. That was a good one. Enjoyed it. Right on, guys. Yeah, we only read 2 stories tonight, but I think there were some good ones. They're made out of meat, an arena. And we finally went one Sci Fi Sunday without reading a Ray Bradbury story. Fancy that. Not that that's, I don't know, not that that's like an unbelievably good thing, but it's just an odd occurrence on Sci-Fi Sundays. He's quite the reoccurring author. Quite the reoccurring author. Sweetness. Yeah, since we're heading towards the end of the stream here, did you have a favorite between the 2 that we read? A favorite part? Or simply something you enjoyed? Or, just how you felt about it? A Ray Bradbury story. A story written by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury. The dude who wrote all this. The Illustrated Man. And the Martian Chronicles. Critically acclaimed author. Generally sweet dude. That does make sense. Right on, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I felt my voice was waning a bit there. Not entirely sure why. I think it might have just been the amount of singing I did over the weekend, coupled with how long the stream went yesterday. But I still gave it my best, and oddly enough, the strain to my voice I think helped with the story in parts. Because in that part where he's like really talking about how, gosh, I need water, my throat burns, I was like, that's like my voice. Yeah, the intro for the Illustrated Man is so good, and that's where the Veld comes from. That's where Kaleidoscope comes from. Those are the ones that we've read from it so far. But it's a whole collection of sci-fi short stories. Yeah, man, Arena. It's a what-if scenario. Goodness, I'm grateful this space station isn't militarized or nothing. Just like a little, kind of... It's kind of like a vacation condo dealio, but it's up in space. I don't know, I'm just glad it's not on the front lines of some kind of alien war. That'd be wild. Sure enough. Oh, so we still got Skippy here. I brought him up again because Snoopy wanted a day off, so I think it has something to do with the fact that he is burning, throughout all of Saturday's stream. He's kind of on fire and constantly, just on fire. So I figured, hey, maybe that warrants a day off on Sunday for Snoopy. Is space looking good today? It is looking good. Yeah, kind of hard to see out the windows. It's it's weird that they have like house windows on the space station. They do a good job at making it feel like it's Earth stuff, but up in space. Kind of hard to see through the window though, although it's very cool and um and aesthetic for being in space. It's kind of hard to see through. Gets space dust all over it. Makes it hard to see the stars. Where in space am I? Shoot. Hang on. Let me check. I think I'm at 2409, 2410. Or near there. I might have passed it a while ago. Not entirely sure. They normally give me like exact exact pinpoint locations as to where we are up here, but since it's nighttime, the guys who normally regulate that are snoozing, so it's only updated to the last time they updated it. So I think we passed that a while ago, but somewhere near that quadrant. Heck yeah, I feel like I'm home in space. Paid good money for this place, so they do it right up here. But speaking of home, sadly I gotta make the descent down back to Earth because I got work in the morning, and I have some clothes to fold before I go to bed, so I do need to call it a night. As far as streaming goes. Yeah, 2409, 2410 is pretty cool. It's got some good constellations nearby. Well, alright guys. I appreciate you dudes sticking around. It was nice to have this stream be a little more chill and relaxed. Especially after last night's stream, which was a hoot and a half. But I think it wore me out more than I think I realized. Heck yeah, it was good to be here. I'm glad I got to finish my meal prep beforehand, and thanks for being cool with like a shorter stream. I think Sundays will most likely be somewhat shorter, because I tend to do my chores on Sunday, and my meal prep and all that, so that eats up a fair chunk of time. And Sunday is the day of rest. So that I don't know what that means or why that's relevant, but anywho, thank you guys for being here. I hope you enjoyed the read, and hope to see you next time. We got Percy Jackson tomorrow, which I'm hyped for. It'll be good to get back to the Titan's Curse. Continue on in our adventures alongside Perseus and Tyson. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Wish me luck at work tomorrow, and yeah, I pray everybody rests real well and wakes up feeling refreshed. As always, guys, remember to take the merriment we created tonight. There might have been some more chillaxed merriment, but merriment all the same. Take it to heart, take it with you to bed, and bring it with you on your adventures tomorrow. As I hope to do. I love you guys bunches and bunches. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Have a good night, guys. And keep on swaying, my wildflowers. Till next time.